Culture's the way that we do things around here. It's also mostly unconscious, which is why it's so difficult to change. We spend billions trying to change cultures, but it doesn't work. And to improve it, you need to make that unconscious culture more conscious. Go for tools, not titles, leadership, management, coaching. Engage your teams. Let's talk to Tom Willis from Phoenix Performance and find out what he's all about. Hello and welcome to the Practical Leadership Podcast, where I interview great leaders and try to extract their wisdom and experience for you to learn from and hopefully avoid making their mistakes. Check out practical-leadership.academy because you want to help your new managers succeed with hybrid or remote working. Tom Willis, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Paul. It's great to talk to you.
You're a former teacher, school superintendent, and now, not recently, 7 years founder and partner at Phoenix Performance Partners, where you help schools and nonprofits build cultures that foster growth. Now, that was very shorthand. What we missed?
That about covers it professionally. But you missed the good stuff, which is I have an amazing wife and 3 awesome kids, and life is good.
That's the stuff that's the foundational stuff. I heard a lovely exposition of life in general, and it was a guy juggling 5 balls, and one of them was rubber, and 4 of them were glass. The rubber one was work. The glass ones were your faith, your family, your friends, and your health. And if you drop any of the 4 glass ones, bad news. But if you drop the work one, it bounces.
I love it.
Keep juggling. So those things are the important ones. The rest of it is just stuff that we do. It's not who you are. Okay.
I love it. And I do know how to juggle, but only 3 balls. So I got to figure that one out, I guess.
Apparently 5, well, I can do 3, but 5 is the way to go. Because 4 is like 2 in each hand, and that's just like too hard. 5, you're still spinning them. Anyway, we digress. No, we don't. This is part of the thing. So, building cultures that foster growth. How did you get from Tanzania to building culture?
Yeah, great question, Paul. And the short answer is, I think my faith. I've been blessed in my life to have lots of different experiences, to get exposed to lots of things, to be fired from a couple jobs along the way, which was
great.
At the time, very painful, but in the hindsight, a huge gift. One in particular from a large company, PricewaterhouseCoopers, during the whole .com explosion of the 2001 timeframe. And I remember being quite depressed, frankly, and not really knowing what to do with my life. And I went over to Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, Africa, to spend some time with my best friend who was over there. And I ended up helping him run a school and teaching. And it just was a real life changer, because I'll never forget how engaged these kids were. And it was one of about 3 high schools in the entire city with a few million kids, by the way. So it shows you how, at the time, how few kids got to go to high school. And, not obviously very well to do. Many of the kids barely had shoes to get to school. And yet their joy and their sense of eagerness to learn was palpable. And I just remember thinking, like, kids are kids. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, how much money you have or don't have, that kids are kids. And it really changed my life to wanting to come back and be of service to others and, specifically to children. And so I came back to Detroit, Michigan, and started teaching. And one thing led to another. And I eventually became the school CEO, or school superintendent, as we call it, of a school system in Detroit. And just loved my time there. I was there for about 15 years. Absolutely loved every minute of it. And we were quite good at the culture work, at creating a strong culture and really pouring into the children that life was much more than just test results and test scores. And so I wanted to help more schools with that and more organizations. And so I ventured off on my own and have been doing this work now for about 7 or 8 years with my business partner and a few others to do just that, to help shape cultures, to help teams take their teams and their cultures to the next level. And it's been a real joy, because we get to work from coast to coast. We've worked in Alaska. We've actually done some work a while back over and across the pond there with you guys in England. And again, it's, humans are humans, and wherever humans are trying to work together more productively is where we can be helpful.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, we think it's culture eats everything.
Yeah.
It really is the ultimate differentiator. If that's the one thing you take away from this as a leader, that would be my suggestion is spend most of your energy thinking about how do I make the culture better today? Because if you do that as a leader, everything else tends to fall into place because culture really is the ultimate competitive advantage.
Can you define it? I mean, I used to lead teams. I've led organizations and businesses, and I advise people. And the focus is on revenue. The focus is on sales, it's marketing, it's on internal operations, it's on your presentation to market, it's on shareholder value, stakeholder value, board meetings. There's stuff that goes on all the time. And then you sit back and you get an NPS result or an internal thing, and it says the culture sucks, or the culture's great, or whatever. I'm not entirely sure anybody really knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's a great point and a great question. And all those things are important, by the way. It's not that they aren't. I've got my master's degree from the University of Notre Dame, and it was an MBA, so I'm fully steeped in all the business terms and whatnot. And so those things are absolutely important. It's just that when you're working in an organization, first of all, there is no such thing as an organization. It's just a legal document that says these people work together. And if you can get those people aligned and working together more effectively, then your organization is going to be more effective. It's that simple. So much of our energy, in fact, there's a drama researcher called Cy Wakeman, and I don't know how she's done this, but she's determined that roughly 20% of our day, so about 2 hours a day, is wasted on drama. So think about that. Think about if you could change your culture to not even get rid of the drama, but cut it in half. That's a tremendous improvement in the ability to be of service to the people that you serve and to be more productive and to generate more revenue and to generate more profit to the bottom line. But fundamentally, it's a human issue. And so culture is I like the Seth Godin definition that it's the way we do things around here. But it's invisible. It's what makes it so difficult to change, by the way, is this one thing that people most often miss, which is that it's mostly unconscious. That we don't realize how much of what we do as human beings is unconscious. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. That's a huge strength. If you think about just the act of driving a car is amazingly complex, amazingly, that we've got our body doing lots of different things. We're tensing the muscles in our legs and our calf and our toes while we're thinking, while we're talking, maybe while we're listening to the radio, while we're turning the wheel, while we're judging the oncoming speed of cars coming. I mean, all that stuff is amazingly difficult. And yet our brains can handle it mostly unconsciously. We don't have to think about it too much. So that's a huge skill. Problem is when we show up at work and we start to work with other human beings, we don't realize that what we're doing, especially as leaders, it sets a tone. Who we're being is much more important than what we do as leaders. And we've got to become much more conscious of how am I showing up at work? How am I being? Because people are following my lead.
You said the organization doesn't exist. You work with profits, non-profits, companies, organizations, groups, schools, whatever. I like the word company because you work in the company of other people. You work together with other people. And whether it's a pizza team or it's whatever the size of the group is, it's in the company of other people. And even if you look at company as a word, it comes from compan, with bread. I break bread with these people. That's where it comes from. These are people with whom I break bread, with whom I live. That's where the company, in the company of others, comes from. So yes, I think culture is the foundation, the keystone, call it what you like, of organizations. It's a thing. All right, I've just spent $300 million in my multi-billion-dollar company trying to improve my culture because somebody in my MPS and HR and my board said culture's a thing and go and do culture. So we're culturing and nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening despite all the millions of dollars I'm spending in this? Tom, help me out here.
Yes. Well, for lots of reasons, and that's the case that most strategic plans and most culture work doesn't work. Billions of dollars are spent around the world, and most of it is wasted. And again, a lot of it's because of that one key piece, which is we don't realize how unconscious it is, and that if we're going to go about improving it, we've got to become more conscious as a CEO and as an executive team, and then we've got to help the rest of our people become more conscious, so that we can all literally be more aware of what we're doing and the impact that our words have on others. So I'll give you an example of an amazing leader that we know. And, she is about the most generous person you'll ever meet, walks around the different locations that they have. Doesn't matter if it's 500 miles from the other location, and the people that work and clean the buildings, the frontline office staff, whatever, they know who this person is. He knows who they are. Just very affable, very likable, very lovable, and was struggling to get results. Was getting frustrated because his team wasn't delivering on things they said they would deliver on. And he had this epiphany one night in working with us that wasn't doing the same thing for his team, wasn't delivering on promises that were made. And this became a huge problem. And so went to work on it, realized that, oh boy, well, if I'm not doing it, then nobody else is. And wasn't doing it on purpose, obviously, but just wasn't conscious to it. So that's an example of what we're talking about here.
I've noticed that if there is an endemic cultural problem, it is invariably from the top. There's a company I was working with who had an appalling approach to time management, never on time for meetings, ever. And in a Zoom call, if you are 3 minutes late for a Zoom call, it's like being 30 minutes late for a real face-to-face thing. That's the sort of approach. But they were always late. And then you realize why. It's because the CEO had no respect for time, or rather, his approach, he was time fluid, or call it what you want. There was just a different attitude to time. And we had a chat, and I said, there are many people who are like you, but there are many people who are not. And the people who are not like you consider it disrespectful. If you are late to their one-to-ones, making that conscious for him, I'm realizing now is what you're saying. You're making something conscious. It's a coaching thing. I coach a lot of people, and 95% of coaching is awareness. You make it conscious, and you say, look, this is what it is. This is the impact it's having. Oh, really? Gosh, well, that it wasn't overnight. It wasn't a miraculous cure, but it is just making these things conscious. Making things conscious, though, is culture values? Is it writing the values of the company on the wall? Or my wife used to work for a company where you had them laminated in a little card. So are you living your culture, or is it laminated? How do you make it conscious? What was your toolkit? How to?
Yeah, great question. There's a professor, Dr. Wilson. He was at the University of Virginia, and he talked about how the human mind can take in roughly 11 million pieces of information at any given moment, and that at any given moment we're conscious of about 40 of those. So 11 million, 40. So in a way, we have no shots at becoming conscious of all that. It's like an impossibility, which is why we need the people in our company, the people we break bread with, to help us. We need that. That's why the work we do is always in teams. We don't do one-on-one coaching. Not that that's bad. It just doesn't tend to have the impact. You need a team of people to come together to help each other to become more conscious, because I may not realize that, I'm avoiding the issues. And luckily, Paul's able to step in and say, hey, Tom, did you realize that in that last meeting, you kind of sidestepped the real issue there? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. Thank you. That's helpful. And when we can really create a coaching culture where we're all just there to help each other, it's not because I'm right and you're wrong, or you're right and I'm wrong. It's just because we all see things differently. We don't see the world as it really is. We need multiple perspectives. And so one of the most valuable things you can do is engage the team in the work of creating a culture. Don't outsource it to one person. Many cases, not always, but in many cases, if a company has a director of culture, then they're probably struggling with their culture, because everybody looks at it like, well, that's that person's job. Well, no, it's every single employee's job. As we're either an cultural ambassador, as Matthew Kelly likes to talk about, where we are adding to the culture every single day in multiple ways, or we're a cultural detractor. We're taking away from it. We're gossiping. We're doing whatever. There is no neutral. We don't get to be neutral. We don't get to blame others. We're either a part of making it better, or we're a part of making it worse. And so that's the first thing, is engaging the entire team to make sure that we're all in this work to improve our culture. And it's not about perfection. It's just about progress. Are we better this week than we were last week? And there's 3 specific tools that we help clients with to really wrap their heads around, that you can use to shape that culture. And we can get into those if that's interesting.
Oh, I think a toolkit would be a phenomenal thing to take away from this. Just as a thing about the director of culture equaling a problem with culture, I think what's the line? I think the gentleman, I think the lady doth protest too much. It's when you're starting to flag something like that. It's a sign. It's a cry for help. It's like having a director of innovation tells you, yeah, you shouldn't be investing in this company. You know, if they're not innovative. And you're saying, well, I'm the director of innovation. No, you're not. You're really not. Sorry. Stop.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And that's not always the case, obviously. There are some amazing folks doing that work. But many cases they're shooting themselves in the foot. You know, just like many large companies stopped hiring a director of safety. You know, if you're a manufacturing facility, you don't want to have one person. It's every person's job to take safety seriously.
Yeah. You actually see it in aspects as well. It's a siloing thing. When you have a very strong finance team, you have a head of finance or head of compliance, you have that team doing that, but typically nobody else understands the money. Typically nobody else understands the compliance pieces. So you're trying to move these things into the business and make the business units, the teams themselves, as you're saying, responsible for whatever that aspect is. In this case, culture. So what are your 3 tools?
Yeah. So let's just put them on the table right out of the gate here. So, and these are tools, not titles. And this is an important distinction because too often we talk about the titles and we get confused. So the tools are leadership, management, and coaching. These are not 3 new tools. These are not 3 new words. We're not trying to create buzzwords. These are time-tested tools that unfortunately nowadays we've made some of them bad and some of them good. So for instance, on LinkedIn, you'll see people say, you know, leadership is good and bad management is bad, or coaching is good and management is bad. And we think that's all phooey. You need all 3. They're equally valuable tools in your toolkit. Because let's say I'm a soccer coach, which I am. I need at times to lead, and then at times I need to manage, and at times I need to coach. Even though my title is a coach, I need to use all 3 tools. As a leader, as a superintendent, as a CEO, you are considered the leader. That doesn't mean that's all you do. There are times when you need to manage, and there's times when you need to coach. So when you can do all 3 of those effectively, you're able to shape the culture that you want. And so let's walk through each of those quickly. You know, we could spend 2 hours on each one of these, by the way. So we're gonna give it a very cursory run by here. It reminds me of the story of these two vultures that are out west United States over the desert, circling a prey and talking to each other as vultures tend to do, right? And all of a sudden this airplane goes flying by, and the one vulture turns to the other and says, "Whoa, that bird was sure in a hurry." And the other one said, "Yeah, you would be too if your ass was on fire."
Love it. All right.
So the point of that is that we're gonna fly through these tools and give it sort of a cursory
F-16 version.
That's right. So leadership is the first and the most important of the 3. It's got to come first, because if you don't have what we like to say is, you know, a shared future, then you got nothing. So leadership is all about generating a view of the future that others take on as their future. So there's a lot of key elements in there, right? That first, you got to generate the future. You got to talk about where the heck are we going? What's the why? You know, what's the vision? What's the purpose? Most of those words, you know, by the way, we think are pretty synonymous. There's lots of people that will disagree with me and spend hours debating the difference between a purpose and a mission and a vision. And that's mostly wasted time, in our opinion. The fundamental point of any of that stuff is that we have a shared future that we align on, and that it's not my future and you're compliant to it. It's that you are excited about it too. You aspire in your heart to that same thing. Because when you and I aspire to the same thing, then we're unstoppable. And that's the real key to leadership is making sure that people genuinely want to go where you want to go. And when we have that shared future together, now we've got something that we can go to work on as a team and as a company.
So leadership, okay? Shared future, vision of the future. Right.
That's right. And if you don't have that future, then you got nothing to manage, you got nothing to coach. So I can't emphasize that enough. It has to come first. And way, way too often, we jump straight into tactics. We jump straight into feedback and giving people, performance improvement ideas. Well, you can't do that if we don't share a similar future. So leadership, it's got to come first. Then you can manage. And what we like to say is you can't actually manage people, which is, I know many people just said, what? You can manage promises that people make, and that's it. You can manage agreements that people make, and that's it. So we like to use the word promise just because it amps up the stakes a little bit. When somebody says, hey, Paul, I promise that I'll meet you at 9 a.m. on Wednesday for this podcast. It's like, oh boy, I better do it because I just made a promise. So it literally gets people sort of perked up and attentive. And so making sure that you're getting promises from people to accomplish X by Y date is really critical, because that's what allows you to move from where you are today towards that shared future. And it sometimes takes dozens, if not hundreds of promises to move towards that future. Most often, though, we as leaders forget to do that. We skip over it, or we're too indirect. We're like, well, it'd be nice if somebody would do this by next week, right? Or we say, hey, can you take care of that? Yeah, sure, I'll take care of that. And then a week later, it's not done, and you're frustrated. Well, because you didn't get a time frame. You didn't get them to promise to a date. So it's really critical that you're direct, you're specific, and it has a time frame. So, of the promises that we're making to each other. Because then when you've got a promise, now you've got something that you can use to hold the person accountable, not in a punitive way, but in a supportive way. Like, hey, you promised to do that. How can I be helpful? Which sort of takes us into coaching. Coaching is everything else. It's literally helping the person pick ideas around. It's giving a book to read. It's sending to a conference. It's brainstorming. It's reading a book. It's listening to an audiobook. It's whatever. It's whatever it takes to support that person to meet their promises so we can move towards that future. So you can see these three things tie together nicely because they're all interrelated. If I was able to draw for you, one of the things I like to draw is a Venn diagram, the leadership, management, and coaching all overlapping, because most of us are really good at one or two of these, but very few people are really good at all three, are very not even good, but conscious of the need to do all three. But when you can really get that fine-tuned and do all three of those, that center overlapping part of the Venn diagram is results. That's where you get the results you're looking for. One more thing about coaching that's important, which is that coaching is only coaching if it's asked for. And we forget this very often. We think just because we're the boss that we can tell people what to do or we can give them feedback. But if they don't want it, we just created a bigger problem than we need, we are consciously thinking about. And so it's really important to slow down and say, hey, I've got some ideas for you if you're open to it. And if the person doesn't say yes, you've got to walk away. You got to give them some time and say, okay, well, that's fine. Let me know when you're open to it. Or there's other things you can do to generate that interest. But fundamentally, our job as leaders, managers, and coaches is to get the person to be open to coaching, which again is a whole nother subject. But fundamentally, coaching is only coaching if it's asked for.
That's a very good definition. Yeah. Otherwise, you're throwing your valuable seeds and they're landing in the path, not in the fertile ground.
Yeah, not even the path. They're outrightly rejected. They've done studies on this. It's fascinating. But they literally, I don't know how they did this, but they hooked up the brain, right? And they found out that saying, are you open to feedback to somebody is the same thing as hearing footsteps in the dark behind you. Like it triggers that sort of same brain chemical reaction.
Nice.
And so it's really important that we're thoughtful about how we do that. That the only way that somebody's going to be open to coaching is if you have a big enough relationship with them where they trust your intent in the first place. If I don't trust that you're on my side, then I'm not going to be interested in your perspective. I'm not going to be interested in your coaching. So it's a really, really valuable distinction, we think.
I like the word observation. So rather than giving somebody some feedback, can I give you some feedback? No. Can I make an observation? You can make any observation you like. Doesn't mean I have to listen to it. So you can now make an observation. Well, I think so. You gives you a kind of cracks the door open just a little bit. Sounds to be a little bit quite helpful. So we've got leadership, shared future, management, not being able to manage people, but you can manage activity, promises, managing a promise, and coaching, which is only coaching if it's asked for. Okay. So these tools together are helping you to engage a team and to improve a culture, then how? How are you improving the culture? What is it you're building? Where are you going?
Yeah, great question. And from here, the work of like Simon Sinek and many others is foundational, because now it's okay. Well, let's get specific about what that future is. What is our why, and really diving into that, because most often we unfortunately have reduced that to an exercise. Like, let's get together, let's sort of craft the perfect mission statement and fine tune it, and play words, play with the game of words and word crafting and all that until we get the perfect statement. And then we're like, okay, check, we're done. Well, I don't know about you, but I've yet to read a mission statement that inspired me by reading it, because they lack inspiration, which is the whole point. So a mission statement at best is a reminder of the mission that you're on. And too often we stop there. And I did the same thing, by the way. I made the same challenge. I made the same mistake when I was a new leader. I'd go off, we'd do a summer retreat, we'd revisit the mission statement, or maybe recraft it, we'd revisit our values, all that. It was good stuff. But then it was like, okay, check, we're done with that. We'll come back to it next summer. When really the job of leadership is to keep it alive 365 days a year for ourselves, first of all, because if we're not inspired, if we're not striving for some future, then we can't possibly have people follow us. And then for our people. And so to be on a mission is very different than have a mission statement.
Your North Star, your reason to get up in the morning. What was it? It's not cynic, it's drive. Daniel Pink. It's the three. It's the people are motivated by purpose. They're motivated by autonomy. And they're motivated by the opportunity to master something. But the P, the purpose, he says, he kind of got that one wrong in the original book. Yes, drive, the surprising truth about things that motivate us. I think that's the name of the book. He said the purpose, people tend to craft the majestic mission statement. We shall place a man on the surface of the moon and return him to Earth safely within the end of the decade. That's a pretty good mission statement, right? But it's kind of hard to get out of bed every morning to craft, to deal with whatever that is. The real purpose tends to be more in the small P rather than a capital P. It's a small P of the people around you, the company that you keep. And it's doing your best for them every day. And if you can get the balance between the two, one is we're going to change the world with a new, financial device that will transmit currencies at the speed of sight. Okay, great. Super duper. Not going to get me out of bed every morning. Good, enjoyable, meaningful, but not the thing that drives me. The thing that drives me is the small P purpose wrapped into that, which is we're going to build a team that's going to build a thing. It's the people that you're surrounding yourself with, I think. So the why.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you brought up financial, so I can't help but think of my wife. She had this idea for years of, how do I help more people? Because she was helping millionaires really as a financial wealth advisor. And she said, why can't we provide these same sets of tools to people that aren't millionaires, to the rest of the world? And so finally she ventured off and started her own app. It's called Pocket Nest. And now they're working with banks and credit unions and employers to help them with their financial wellness tool for employees. And they're on a mission to quite literally help the everyday man get their financial house in order. And they think if they can do that, when they do that, it will change the world fundamentally. So that's sort of the big purpose of Pocket Nest, is to literally make a difference in the world by helping people get their financial house in order using an app. Now, every day, they've got to figure out how to make their sort of what we call sub-purposes. Like, what's my part of that purpose?
Yeah.
If I'm leading the technology team, what's our sub-purpose? Or if I'm leading the financial team, what's our sub-purpose as a department? And then below that, what's mine individually? What's my component of that? What am I doing to contribute to the big purpose? And so you've got to help cascade down and throughout the organization the purpose, because if you don't, then you're lost. There's a great story of John F. Kennedy, speaking of the moon, walking around NASA, and he's talking to people, and they're giving the dog and pony show tour, and he kind of goes off script and starts talking to this gentleman who's got a mop in his hand, and he said, what's your name, man, sir? And so they started talking, and he said, so what's your job here? And the janitor says, my job is to help put a man on the moon. And that's when you've got it as a culture, when every single person sees that they're a part of, not the only part, but they're a part of the overall mission, of putting the man on the moon.
Yeah. It's an organizational diagnostic that I do when I go into companies and try and help them do whatever they want to do better. And you ask the leadership team, what do you do? How do you make money? Who are your customers? How do you find them? All that sort of stuff. Where are you going? And it's rare you get a consistent set of answers. When you do get a consistent set of answers, I'm sitting there thinking, well, never mind. No work for me here. But it's where you're finding, what do? We sell widgets. We service widgets. We develop widgets. Okay, right. Good work to be done. That's good. Let me ask you, what is the book, podcast, movie, video, whatever, that you recommend more for people?
Oh, there's a few out there that are good. In fact, this whole top row is stuff that I particularly love, including the book that we're writing. We just got the cover of it. This is the little
look
cover
at that.
of the great engagement. So it'll be out in a few months. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. But the other one I really like is Brave New Work by Aaron Dignan. A really innovative book. Most of the business books that are out there are kind of regurgitating a lot of the same stuff, which is not bad. It's just some of the timeless wisdom. In fact, our book does some of that too. Aaron really does a nice job of mixing things up and really coming at how do you truly innovate, in the world of businesses and companies and organizations. So that's top of mind for me.
I like that. Innovation, Brave New Work, Aaron Dignan. We'll put a link and we'll put some details in the descriptions of this episode here as well. Is there one thing, apart from making that to Tanzania, that you would like to thank young Tom for having done?
Well, a lot of it's, I was just fortunate, frankly, to have an amazing family, parents that were married for 50 plus years and two older brothers that really motivated me. And I think that work ethic, my dad had in particular was really probably the thing that I'm most proud of and still proud of is just, there is no overnight success. Even though the world wants to tell you that and social media wants to tell you that if you want anything in life, you got to work for it. And you just got to grind it out sometimes. So that's probably the one thing is nothing replaces hard work.
1% inspiration, 99% perspiration, I think that was.
Yes, amen to that.
And lastly, then, how can people find you, Tom?
Yeah, phoenixperform.com is our company. Phoenix, like the city, perform.com. I'm on LinkedIn mostly. I don't do much of the other social media. So Thomas Willis, we're in Michigan here. And email is just tom@phoenixperform.com.
Marvelous. Team engagement, leadership, management, coaching tools, not titles. 20% of your day wasted in drama. Culture, that's just the way that we do things around here, but it's mostly unconscious and therefore hard to change. Tom Willis, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you, Paul. It's been great.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining me today. Your homework is to leave your 5-star review, and please, any comments you have, you really help me to improve every day, and it also helps people to discover me online. You should check out practical-leadership.academy because you want to help your new managers succeed with hybrid or remote working.